everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Straight Talk podcast. I'm excited this week to have Johnny Quinn with us. He's going to be speaking at our annual meeting this year. He is a U.S. Olympian, former NFL wide receiver, and third person in history to play pro football and Winter Olympics. Lives in Texas, so pretty close to where we are. Has family there and has spoken at some of the largest organizations, companies, Toyota, Southwest, Lockheed Martin. So we're excited to have you joining us today. I really went down the rabbit hole on your story. Honestly, it's pretty incredible story. Tell me kind of your background a little bit, some of the stuff that maybe didn't make the bio.
Yeah. So when you grow up in Texas, Nathan, you don't think bobsled, okay? Yeah, we don't
Hmm.
really get any ice or snow. And so, like just like any kid growing up and you play sports, it's that dream of, hey, one day I want to be a professional athlete. And what was really neat was to actually experience that. And so 22 years old, I did enter the NFL, which was a dream come true. But by age 26, I'd been cut 3 times. I lost $2.6 million and I blew out my knee. And so here I am.
Wow.
Dream came true. And now my life's a train wreck, devastated. First career, an absolute failure. And so what I realized is that, it wasn't a knock on my character when you fail. But that circumstance, it did not work out. And so I used some of those tools that I learned from that devastating time to springboard me forward. And so I started in 2010 with Team USA. I did a 4-year circuit with Team USA. I was there for a quad and made the Olympic team in 2014. So heavy
Yep.
heavy on the sports background. What's
Yep.
interesting, Nathan, though, is I've seen sport at the elite level in 2 different arenas. Not a lot of people get to do that. Only
Hmm.
typically, if you make it to that level, you see it in one, which you learn a lot in general. But to see it in two, it has given me a unique perspective on maybe some tools that can transfer from each sport into the marketplace. And that's what I'm excited about when we get to September and being your speaker is
Yeah.
bringing these tools to our event.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Were you always a competitive person, or when did that come later in life?
No, very competitive growing up. I watched a lot of back in the day videos of Jerry Rice,
Hmm.
arguably the greatest football player of all time, wide receiver with the San Francisco 49ers. Because Nathan, here's and I was a young lad at the time. I just thought all NFL players are great players, right? But what I noticed when I watched some film of Jerry Rice working out in the offseason with other NFL players, they would come on camera and they would tell the camera that they couldn't keep up with Jerry Rice and his training regimen. And so it
Hmm.
was at that point that I realized that there's something to effort. There's something more than just showing up, that if you apply yourself, you can do great things. And so I think sport was that outlet for me early on that says,
Yeah.
hey, if I commit, if I give full effort, not just on game day, but actually in practice, we can do some special things here.
Yeah, definitely. So, back in the NFL days, I'm sure that was a dream. You
Yeah.
probably, um, worked really hard kind of towards that goal. What was that moment like when teams started calling and you started getting those, offers, things like that?
Yeah, it was pretty special. I thought I was going to get drafted in the 5th round of the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were on the phone with my agent, but they ended up going in a different direction. I was a little disappointed when the NFL draft was over because I did not get drafted. When it was over, though, I did have 4 free agent contracts from 4 different NFL teams, and so I didn't stay a free agent for that long. We
Hmm.
selected a team within the probably within 10 minutes concluding the NFL draft. And Nathan, look, to see that contract, to sign on the dotted line, to step in an NFL stadium and a locker room and see your name. I mean, it was a dream come true.
Yeah.
It was very rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah, that's must have been quite a moment. And then
Yeah.
To get cut, like
Yeah.
that must have been pretty devastating, just sort of that high and low. What was that feeling like?
Yeah, that was, when I got cut, I would say the first time, because up to that point in life and football, I'd always been good, right? I'd
Hmm.
always been able to overcome and move on to the next level. And so when I got cut from the NFL, Nathan, that was the first time somebody came in, sat me down, looked me in the eyes, and they said, "Hey, Johnny, you're not good enough. Today we are cutting you."
Yeah.
And so, devastation, disappointment, loss,
Hmm.
um, uncertainty, right? Because I've
Yeah.
never, again, I've always made the team. I've always worked my way up to a starter. And so here now it's like, wait, I have to pack my bags.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to go home.
Yeah. Something that you work so put so much effort into. I can only
That's right.
imagine.
That's right.
Um, how do you go from a wide receiver to bobsled? I mean,
Yeah.
that's some people would kind of see that as a pretty unique transition. You know.
Yeah. Have you seen or heard of the movie Cool Runnings, the Jamaican bobsled team? You just
Yeah.
watch that movie over and over. No, I'm kidding. You can't. Because you cannot go to college to be a bobsledder. They don't offer any NCAA college bobsledding. They have to recruit from other sports, and so
Hmm.
football and track and field are popular sports that the bobsled team recruits from. And so played collegiate football, made it to the NFL. So I had the football, kind of the build there as a football player. But a lot of people don't know this is I also walked onto the track and field team in college. And so I spent 4 years running Division I track. And so you can imagine the crossover. Got to be strong to lift a sled. You got to be fast, run on ice behind a sled. And so I kind of had the physical build, right,
Hmm.
that they were looking for. Now, of course, there's a technique to that. You've got to learn the technique. But I kind of had the build, and then some unique things lined up. My agent represented a bobsledder back in the day, and my mom, one of her coworkers, was a bobsledder back in the day. And so when professional football was over, I still felt like I had something left in the tank. And I sent some film to a driver at the Olympic Training Center, and the rest is history.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, it's funny to think about, um, that progression, what that journey must have looked like, and then the sort of viral uh, picture that you posted
Yeah.
on Twitter, gets all this attention. Um, an unintended moment, I guess,
Yeah.
kind of blows up for you, but yeah. I remember seeing that picture on the news, and I was like,
Yeah. Who
that was
knew?
one of the takeaways from the Sochi Olympics.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
Um, so there's sort of this chapter between, the NFL is over. I'm
Hmm.
at the Olympics. Nobody
Hmm.
talks about that gap. What was that process? How did you sort of process that? How did you come back from that
Yeah.
sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So think about this. So, my last football team I'm on is in 2010, and then I don't make the Olympic team until 2014. So there's a 4 year gap. That think about this from an identity standpoint. I'm an NFL failure, and I'm an Olympic hopeful, trying to make the Olympic team. It hadn't happened yet, right? I mean, I could get cut from the Olympic team. And so those 4 years, I would say mentally were very tough because think about my resume up to this point, Nathan. I've just been cut multiple times. Here I am back in another athletic situation, great at a high level, but there's no guarantee that I'm making the Olympic team here. I mean, there are really good athletes at the Olympic Training Center. And so it was at that point, and this is kind of funny, I became an avid reader, a
Yeah.
reader. Because here's what I had to find out, Nathan. I needed to know, are there men and women in life, sport, business, it doesn't matter, that are older than me? So you got to think about this. I'm 26 at the time, right? That has anybody gone through a major failure or setback and was okay, or made
Hmm.
it, or did something different that did some great things. And you know what's crazy, Nathan? It's very elementary now that I say this out loud. The more I read like biographies and understand, this is actually the prerequisite.
Yeah.
It's failure after failure after failure, and it's getting back up, getting back up, getting back up. And so that kind of gave me some hope that as much
Yeah.
as I hated getting cut, and I'm not yet an Olympian, Nathan, let's still get up, let's still put our best foot forward, and let's still give maximum effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, feel that sting of failure,
Yeah.
and it's easy to sort of live there, to sort of feel like, okay, I'm not good. I, you know, my
Yeah.
my life is over. I'm not coming back
Yeah.
from this. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about and sports people, I would even say sports people, we can even kind of be the worst where we try to hide failure, or what we try to do, Nathan, is we try to relabel it. So I'll give you an example. People will say, you either win or you learn. Or here's one. I've never lost a game in my life. I just ran out of time. No, you lost.
Hmm.
You didn't have enough points at the end of the fourth quarter. That's an L.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, and this is how I thought through it. If we can accurately define what just happened, we can grow from it. It's when we play these games on, well, it didn't work out because I just didn't really try. Well, why didn't you try? Right. And
Hmm.
so now we're playing in like a different universe because we didn't even address what actually happened. And
Yeah.
so I'll be the first to tell you, failure hurts. No one likes it. And even now I look back, did it prepare me for what came next? Yes. I still didn't really like the moment. I mean, I would
Hmm.
have loved to play out my contracts and got all that money and played 10 years and won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing now, looking back on that season of life, I was able to accurately describe what happened, Nathan. It was an NFL failure. I'm not a failure. It's not a knock on my character, but watch this. I accurately described what happened, and then I used that moment to springboard me forward. And I
Hmm.
think that's where people, you made a good point on
Mm.
we kind of wallow in it, or it's like, oh, I'm a fit, and we
Yeah.
miscategorize it. Where if we can just truly define what's going on and separate our character away from that and look at the situation and say, yeah, you know what, that didn't work out. Whether it's a business venture, a relationship, look, insert whatever it may be. It,
Yeah.
being able
That
to accurately define it allowed me to move forward.
that is a really important point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that is the other side of it, is a lot of people try to cover up,
Right.
mediocrity, and then they're just live with it. They just sit in
Yeah.
that space, and yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really good point. Um, these doctors that are, kind of in our audience, I guess, they end up kind of filling a lot of different roles.
Yeah.
From a sports analogy, they're the quarterback, the coach, the owner. They're kind of all in one person.
Yeah.
Where does your motivation come from when you're supposed to be the one motivating everybody else?
Yeah. So I think about this idea of what I call borrowing wisdom. It's the ability to uh, tap into other people in the similar lane of life that we are in and learn from. And so when you're wearing all those hats, the first thing that comes to mind, Nathan, is burnout. Is we have to protect this idea of burnout, because burnout cannot be contained. It spreads, right? Your
Hmm.
team feels it. Your decisions reflect it, and your family carries it. And so, what we want to think about is, and as I study leaders in sport and business, to combat burnout, particularly when you're wearing all the hats, is it's this idea around this leadership tool of a great leader or leadership is not about absorbing everything. it's about knowing what not to carry,
Mm.
right? The best leaders, they don't just manage results, they manage energy.
Yeah.
And so they know when to push and when to recover, right? They create margin, they protect their focus. And here's the key. They build rhythms that allow them to sustain performance, not just spike it.
Mm.
Right? Because the goal is not how hard can we go for a short season.
Yeah.
It's the best leaders. We want to operate. How long can we operate at a high level without breaking yourself or the people around you? And for my sports analogy, Nathan, is it's the goal's not to win one quarter, right?
Yeah.
It's to build something that lasts, and that requires strength that can be
Hmm.
sustained. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good point. A lot of people are dealing right now with, the labor market. There's a lot of turnover in practices. How do you build something that holds together even when the people on the team change?
Yeah, one of the things when I think about building a team, because I've seen a team in the NFL and I've seen a team in the Olympics, and it can be a revolving door. I mean, guys are in and out. I mean, you don't even know who your next teammate is because the landscape changes quite a bit. What I have found and what I've noticed that these elite teams do is that they understand what makes each person tick. Let me give you an example. Everybody has a pretty good idea of the golden rule. What's the golden rule? The golden rule is you treat others the way you want to be treated. I think that's a little nonsense. Nathan, it's all about the platinum rule. Here's the platinum rule. You treat others the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated. Because if we
Hmm.
take their perspective, now we're understanding spouses' names, kids' names, hobbies outside of work, but we're taking a deeper focus into that person when we want to treat them the way they want to be treated. And so I found following that platinum rule has helped strengthen teams.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, y- one thing that I thought about, and maybe you have something to share on this. Our doctors, a lot of them are private practice owners. They kind of do everything for their team. It's usually one or
Yep,
two to five practices. And a lot of times they're increasingly faced with corporate dental competition where
sure.
there's multi-billion-dollar companies coming in and kind of competing. And a lot of times you can kind of feel intimidated by that,
Mm.
feel that, you can't compete in that space. Um, what do you tell someone who's going up against someone who seems like they have more resources, more, more, uh, kind of a deeper bench of tools and skills and things like that?
Yeah, you shared something that a lot of people fall into, and it's a trap, and it's around this resource game. That well, if I had more resources, or if I had a bigger team, or if we had access to, and what happens is it robs you of your gifts and your resources that you have access to today. And I'll tell you what this boils down to. It boils down to belief. Do you actually believe that the tools and resources that you have today you can win with? And what I've seen at the elite level, where everybody's good, yet resources vary on what's available, is it's the men and women with the belief that we are going to come in here and we are going to serve our client, our customer. We're going to take care of them to the best of our ability and not look around and see what everybody else is doing and worry about what everybody else is doing. We are focused on our race and the direction we're trying to go. And so I've noticed that it comes down, that's a belief issue, Nathan, not necessarily a resource issue. Now, are we always pressing for better technology, better processes, optimizing efficiency? Of course, right? We don't ever outgrow that. We're always looking at how do we maximize that. But at the end of the day, it's belief. And I would say this, particularly to an industry veteran, somebody who's been in the game for a while, is have you been drifting? Do you have that same fire you had when you got started? And that is very hard for somebody who's been in the space for years. And I'll tell you why. Because they've seen everything. They know the cycles. They know what comes next. They've rode the hills and the valleys, but it requires a fresh belief every single year.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really good. I mean, now I'm really excited for this
Yeah,
event coming up in September. I'm excited
it's
for
gonna
that.
be great.
You wrote a book as well, and I
Huh?
ordered a copy of it. I have not had a chance to
Nice.
read it yet, but it's the Push framework.
Yep.
Tell me a little
Mhm.
bit about that.
Yeah, so there it is right here, push, breaking through the barriers. And so we've got a framework on how do you identify areas that might be holding you back. And so the push stands for prepare, U is for understand, S is for serving, and the H is to harness. How do we get out there and springboard? And so when I got back from the Olympics, I wrote this book with a lot of the wisdom and knowledge that I learned from teachers and coaches along the way. Here's what a lot of people don't know, and I wrote about this in the book, is I was benched week 3 of an Olympic year. There's 8 weeks in the Olympics. Your name better be on the roster week 8. Nathan, 5 weeks before the Olympic Games, I got benched because management wanted to try a different combination. I had 9 flights booked to Russia for family and friends. You want to talk about stress levels out of the roof when I got benched.
Mm,
Sure, it worked out, but I wrote about how I handled that. Here's kind of the cool thing about the book is that if you are a reader, it reads just like a regular book, page 1 all the way through the end. Here's the neat part. If you are not a reader, the way my publisher and I set this book up is that each chapter can actually stand alone. So you
mm,
could go to the middle of the book and just say, hey, I want to read about Johnny's time in the NFL with the Buffalo Bills, the Green Bay Packers, and just read those chapters. Or you could go to Olympic trials and just read that chapter. So it's kind of a fun way, kind of a fun framework on how we set the book up.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, cool. I can't wait to dig into the book, and I can't
Yeah,
wait for the event this fall. You're going to be there as our keynote, and we're excited to have you. So,
awesome. Well, it's going to be great, and I can't wait to see everybody in September.
yes, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in September.